doing an experiment tonight. We're on, my name is Steve Stein. My company's Wisdom Feed and Better Listen, publish audiobooks, do courses, and if we survive tonight, we do Facebook Lives also. This is our first Facebook Live. And just to tell you a little bit how this got started, for the last year and a half, I've been throwing around the idea of cyber salon, kind of like virtual panel discussions. And then Melissa Straub and we worked throughout the summer on this course. Actually, it's been a 3-year process on this course. We working on this course, Cyber
Safety for Parents in the Digital.
One more time, let me hear it, Melissa. Help me out.
Cyber Safety for Parents in the Digital Age. I've got it in my brain.
All right, good. I just have so many screens going. Thank you. So, all right, and so we finished this course, and then in other kind of quadrants of my life, I came across Cheryl Browse, and we'll do more of an introduction as we move forward, who works in the mindfulness space, and Theodora Petkovic.
Very good, yep.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
And who also works in the tech-dependent space and also mindfulness and balance. But I'm just going to read the bios now, and we'll get started. And let's go. One note, if you have any questions, you can post them in the posting area on Livecast or under the video in the Facebook Live, and we will have a Q&A later in the program after we do our initial presentations. Okay, here we go. Melissa Straub is the instructor for cyber safety for parents in the digital age course that we just finished. She's a private investigator, social justice advocate, and a licensed private detective in the state of New Jersey. She's a former police detective with specialized training as a school resource officer and has more than 20 years of experience in the field of child advocacy, cybercrime, and I can go for another 20 minutes, but yes, she's got great experience. Cheryl Browse is a mindfulness instructor with focus on working with mindfulness for teens, mindful parenting, as well as teaching mindfulness in schools to help address the epidemic of stress and anxiety, among other challenges facing our youth today. Last but not least, Theodora Petkovic. She's a psychotherapist, parenting coach, specializing in emotional intelligence and positive psychology practices to create greater digital wellness and balance. So you can kind of see how the universe of people kind of came together in different areas, different quadrants. So before we start the round of everyone kind of introducing themselves in depth, anything else you guys want to mention, or should we just get started? Am I missing anything? We're ready to go? Okay, perfect. All right, first up is Melissa Straub, and she's going to tell us, for a few minutes about who she is and her work and how she kind of got here. And then we're going to go into what issues do you see at work? What are the recurring themes? Because I know out of the 5 of us, I know 3 of us have teens. 3 of us have teens. And so it's a personal issue as well. So what kind of issues do you see in your work? And so introduce yourself and tell us what's up in your workspace.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. First thing off, you could not have gotten a better panel than the ladies that we have above. Because I will tell you, on the cyber education component, we speak a lot about, when I'm in the schools, we talk about tech dependence and we talk about mindfulness. So when we are going to be talking throughout this evening, it's very important to note that all 3 aspects really fall into play not only with the course that I'm talking about, but in general with the topics that we'll speak about, because we will talk about tech dependence and how important it is with mindfulness and taking that stress away from the kids as it relates to getting them off the various different devices. So I am blessed to have the three ladies that we have, and you, Steve, well, two ladies and you, Steve, online with us tonight. But let me introduce myself a little bit more. I have vast training in computer forensics, electronic discovery. As Steve mentioned, I'm trained in other things related to school safety, traumatic incident debriefing in the state of New Jersey. I have a master's in counseling. I'm also a school counselor. The reason I do what I do is, and by the way, I go around the country and speak to the schools, not only with the kids and the educators, but it's very important to close that loophole and get the parents involved as well. But you had mentioned me being a mom. I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and it's very important to help assist them navigate the risks that come associated with technology and some of the dependence that happens with them later on. So this is a whole new world for our children, and my goal is to really get out there and educate the school, the community, the parents, and the children all about these associated risks. Because as I mentioned in my presentation, one picture, one video, one comment, one time can take a child's reputation down. They will not have the opportunity like we did to make the same mistakes without paying for things in a different consequences these day and ages. So the ultimate goal for me as a presenter is to try to avoid having these kids make those types of mistakes. I still want them to be children. I want them to use technology because I truly believe technology and social media is a gift. It's all about balance and recognizing what the kids are being exposed to, what they're seeing, and what they're sharing. So that's the ultimate goal for me as the educator as it relates to cyber safety.
Excellent. And what kind of things are you seeing? I mean, trends, problems parents are having? I mean, we can go for 3 hours about it, but
yeah,
what's up for people?
Yeah, a lot of the time what I feel is the biggest fear that parents have is accepting the fact that their kids know more than they do. They fear technology itself. So they either completely avoid it, or they will hand a digital device or access to the internet with literally zero training or expectations or conversation. So the key aspect that I want parents to really understand is they will never know more than their children. However, they need to continue with communication. That is a very key factor for parents. So understanding that technology is a gift, but also understanding that you have to ease them into technology, set expectations, have conversations with them. And this is a lifelong process. A lot of parents will say, well, should I just have this conversation in middle school? And then that's it. This conversation needs to begin at pre-K level. They're learning and having digital shadows on devices right off the bat in pre-K, believe it or not. So conversations with parents and making sure that parents are comfortable and learning how to engage their kids with technology and not fearing the fact that technology is overwhelming to parents, right? They need to treat technology related discussions like anything else they already do as a parent. They use their existing skills, morals, and values already in place and apply that to technology. So that's kind of like what I'm really kind of seeing as it relates to parents, is the fear of engaging in that conversation. Or am I going to look stupid because I don't know what Kik is, or I don't know what Snapchat does? They need to become somewhat educated. Using modeling behavior is key. And also it's okay to say, I don't know what that is. Reach out for resources and have conversation with other parents and use teachable moments with their kids to talk about some of these apps and sites and devices that they're using.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that is a lot of ways kind of a preview for what we go really into in the course. Okay,
Right.
so now next up is Cheryl Cheryl Browse. So would you like to introduce yourself a bit, and the same drill, tell us a bit what you see in your work and what do you do in the schools or with individuals?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. What a pleasure to be with you and these other two experts, and Steve, of course. So, I am the mother of three. I have a 19-year-old son in college. He's a sophomore. I have a senior in high school and a freshman in high school. So I'm sort of in the midst of mothering adolescents, and I certainly am, very well aware of the influence of social media and the digital world on our lives and on their lives, which is a whole new world than the one I grew up in. So that's my personal experience with it every single day. And of course, the influence that the digital world has on myself, my own life. About 10 years ago, I dove deeply into mindfulness. I needed a way to better understand how I could slow down, how I could be more present with my children, better connected to myself. And I just found that mindfulness and meditation changed my life. And all I wanted to do was share this information with other people. So I created a company called To Be Present. I trained in all different kinds of curriculum. Everything from an MBSR program for teens, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, a program called Learning to Breathe. I went on a sort of deep dive myself, personal practice, and then I studied for many years with an organization called Mindful Schools and became a certified instructor through them and worked for them for a while. And so through both my own personal journey into mindfulness and learning how to be more present with my children, be a better communicator because I was less distracted, less judgmental with my children, a better listener. I found that mindfulness really informed my own life and helped me be a better parent. I started teaching mindful parenting and mindfulness skills to adults, and all of my clients, students kept saying, "This is awesome. I need my kids to learn this." So I began offering programs to teens. I began working in schools, and Mindful Schools is an organization who helps train outside providers and teachers to work in schools. So I worked in many school districts in Westchester County, both in the classroom and training teachers to either just be more mindful themselves in the classroom or to implement mindfulness curricula in schools. So it's really been an amazing journey. And it's transformed my life, and it's transformed many of the people's lives that I've worked with. And social media, digital wellness, technology plays a huge role in what I'm seeing. And I think in many ways, a large part in the rise in mindfulness, quite frankly, for many reasons. And this, Steve, goes into the second part of the question. As we all know, I think everyone knows who's listening in on the panel, there's just a huge increase in stress and anxiety in our society, particularly among youth, but certainly among adults as well. We feel overwhelmed and stressed out. And in large part, I think that the digital use of technology plays a large part in that. I think we are essentially training ourselves to not be mindful. We are essentially training our brains every day to be distracted and multitasking, which a lot of the science shows causes fatigue, it causes stress. So mindfulness really is learning to be more focused and present. It's like a brain training, among many other things. And it really is a wonderful antidote to the low-grade levels of stress that are just pervasive among both adults and children these days. There's lots of implications also of the use of social media and technology with kids: lack of focus, inability to concentrate, lack of a true sense of connection, being really present where you are with the people you're with. Our kids are very good at being present with people over digital media streams and social media, which really isn't a true social connection. So there's a void there. And of course, just there's a whole issue that we can get into of just why do we use social media? Why do we grab our phones all the time? There's a sort of a lot of avoidance of understanding of our own emotions, of emotional regulation. all kinds of implications that I think sometimes the social media is just a crutch or an avoidance mechanism to really understand ourselves and have self-awareness and develop our own emotional regulation. So mindfulness for me and my work is really a skill that we're teaching kids to turn off their phones, or when phones, to be more aware of why they're on their phones and how their phones are actually making them feel. So there's a lot of self-awareness skills that we can learn about how to properly use it in positive ways that make us feel good, and how to be without it. So that's sort of a lot of stuff, but really, really important, I think, to develop these skills and to be more self-aware of the impact that the digital devices and social media have on our health and wellness.
Wow. So it's so interesting because the three of you kind of are dealing with 80% the same issues, but coming at it from different aspects. And that's part of the reason why I was like, wow. And one of the things before we get to you, Tio, is when Melissa was saying she was more and more getting asked when she presents in schools to do something about mindfulness. And you know, just dots started connecting. So the next dot that we're connecting is with Tio. So Tio, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into this, and you know what your work is.
Sure. So I also have to say I'm really glad to be a part of this panel, and it's my first time being with these ladies, with Melissa and Cheryl. And so thank you, Steve, for bringing us all together. I totally agree with you. I think we're all essentially talking about the same issue, but we're talking about it from slightly different perspectives and from our own personal experiences and our own kind of walks of life. So I hope our listeners and our viewers are going to get a lot of useful information from us tonight. So my background's in basically in psychology. I'm a psychotherapist and a parenting coach and an international speaker. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and then I've trained in different modalities of both psychotherapy and coaching. And I really specialize in using emotional intelligence, positive psychology practices, and then also research findings from neuroscience to help both adults and children improve their well-being, and particularly in that area of digital well-being or digital wellness. So really it's all about helping them create digital balance through using technology in much more mindful, much more kind of intentional and purposeful ways. And I do this in a kind of a number of different ways. I like to keep my work pretty kind of dynamic and varied. So I'm based in New York, so I work with clients one-on-one here. I also work with clients online over the phone. And then I also do a lot of workshops and talks at different venues like workplaces and schools. And again, I try to speak at public events as much as possible at things like conferences, because again, like what Melissa was saying, I think these are topics that we really need to keep at the front of our minds, and be very, again, mindful and conscious and aware of them. And so I always like to work in groups or get on panels like this, because we reach so many more people when we work in these contexts. The way I got kind of into this digital wellness space, because I wasn't, I haven't been there for that long. It started about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. I moved to New York about 3 years ago. Before then, I was in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, where technology is very, very highly valued. And so what I started noticing was that I was seeing kids, greater and greater numbers of kids attached to their devices, on the bus, on the street, at the restaurant, in the coffee shop, and just disconnected basically from their parents. So because I was working with children at that time, and I've been working with kids for a very long time, my first question was, what is this doing to children? What is this doing to their psychological well-being, emotional well-being? What is it doing to their kind of concept of the world and how they relate to parents? And for the first kind of year or two, my focus was mainly on the kids. And I think globally, our focus at first was on the children. And then at one point, I feel like we all kind of globally turned around and went, wait, what are the parents doing while the kids are connected? And so then I became interested in that side of the equation too. And again, like I forget now if it was Melissa or Cheryl who mentioned modeling and how important that is as well. So so then part of my interest was also to do with that, with helping parents look at their own habits and look at how they relate to technology and how they use technology, and try to adjust that a little bit in order to then help their kids develop healthier habits. We know from a lot of the research in the mental health field that with certain issues that children are experiencing, oftentimes we can help them just by helping their parents. And so there was a recent study that was done at Yale with children who experience a lot of anxiety, where the researchers only worked with the parents. They never saw the kids, they never spoke to the kids, but they found that after a number of weeks of working with the parents, the children's anxiety began to lessen. And so I think working with parents is really important for that reason. They're kind of the most direct access to their children. And so I also like to have a very kind of systemic approach when it comes to that. And really my goal always is to help the child. Like I said, I've been working with kids for a very long time. I love children. That's just kind of that's my reason for doing the work that I'm doing, helping kids. And so I like to work with everybody who comes in contact with those kids, because I think whether you're the parent of the child, a relative, a teacher, or not, I feel we all have that responsibility to be very mindful of how we interact with technology, even when we're out in public, because it's impacting kids. The number of times that I'm on the subway and I'll see, a little child, maybe 2 or 3 years old, sitting on one side, and on the other side, every single adult is looking at their tech. And I wonder, what does this child experience when they look up and they can't make eye contact with anyone who's sitting across from them? So one of the kind of habits that I've taught myself is anytime I see a child anywhere in my vicinity, if I catch myself on my phone, I'll always put it away. I'll put it in my pocket, or I'll put it in my bag, and I'll make eye contact with that child. And I'll smile at them. And anyone who has kids or works with kids knows how easy it is to engage children. All it takes is a little smile, and they're right there with you. So so I like to work again specifically with kids, specifically with parents, but I really feel very strongly about kind of globally, generally as a society, raising awareness about these topics, because I think we actually all can help children in much bigger ways than we actually realize, just by being a little bit more aware of how we use technology. And then in terms of kind of some of the questions that I come across when I speak to parents, whether it's in some of these group settings or individually, sometimes it can be even kind of non-tech related questions. Parents oftentimes have questions about, why is my child doing this? Or how can I stop them from doing this? Or how can I make them do this? Like those are the main 3 questions. So it can be everything from, not using the iPhone as much to eating more broccoli and not, spitting out their fruits. So I get a whole variety. I get all those different questions.
And a lot of the kids do all 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely, exactly. So some of the questions will just be related to things like that. It might be some emotional issues that kids have. Again, I think Cheryl was mentioning emotional regulation. It's such an important thing. So so parents often have questions about how their kids regulate emotions, how they can help them better do that. When it comes to technology itself, parents have so many questions about it. Should we give them tech? Should we not give them tech? How old should they be when they get their own device? Is there such a thing as good tech versus bad tech? Is there such a thing as educational tech? If I'm with my kids on my phone for an hour, is that better, or should I be with them for 5 minutes without the tech and just have kind of direct one-on-one time with them? So parents, and again, as Melissa was saying, they're scared, they're overwhelmed. As Cheryl was saying, they're anxious. They just have so many questions about this technology, and there's still so little that we all actually know about it. But what's wonderful to see is that there's such a diversity there of experts who are really trying to, like we were saying before, tackle these issues from all different sides and try and help people as much as possible to answer some of those questions.
Wow, phenomenal. Excellent. So I see Jean just typed a question. So I just want a word from our sponsor and just a little bit to tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Steve Stein, and I've been publishing audiobooks since cassettes, and in the field of mindfulness, wellness, psychology, and got back into it about 8 or 10 years ago. And then we have a company called Better Listen where we distribute audios and of a lot of leading people in the mindfulness space and the wellness space. Then we started doing these online courses, and the way this kind of came around is Melissa Straub spoke at my kids' school. I have 14, my boys are 16 and 14 now. And about 3 years ago, she spoke at my kids' school, and my wife missed the presentation. And I said, Melissa, do you have a copy of this? My wife we need this, we'd love to get it. And she said, no, but help me make one. So here we are, then that 3 years went by and came around on the guitar again. And now we have the course. And I posted links to the course in both the Castbox live cast, and also under the Facebook Live. And through Sunday, if you want to buy the course, you can use the code Cyber30, not Cyber Sunday, Cyber30, and you get a 30% discount off the program. And the course is not quite launched, but this is part of the launch. And so one thing I want to say also, we're looking at maybe perhaps doing this again next Thursday, perhaps with a little more confidence, and that we know what we're doing tech-wise. And so one of the things I'd like folks to do is to post in the questions if there's any questions you want answered now, and we'll do the questions at the end, or if there's any questions or deeper dives you want us to do next week. Because it's kind of an experiment. We're going to do this for 2 weeks. And maybe longer if there's a calling for it, or if there's a interest in it. So, what before we go on, so why don't you guys tell everyone your websites and how to find you guys and how to find more about your work?
You want me to go first?
Sounds good.
Okay. Again, my name's Melissa Straub. I have 2 different companies. My first company is called High Impact Youth Training Solutions. And you can just use www.youthtrainingsolutions.com. Primarily that particular company is all for my speaking engagements. I do travel the country and speak at various different conferences and schools and associations. So you can look at my material there. The other company is called Without a Trace Investigations.com. And primarily that company focuses in on cybercrime, very local here in New Jersey and New York area, assisting with some of the issues around cyber harassment and cybercrime in general. But if you would like to visit my website, you can see where I'm going to be speaking or where I'm going to be at in the next couple of months. I try to update that pretty frequently. What else was the other question, Steve?
That's a good place to start, I think.
Okay.
Cheryl?
So my company is called To Be Present. It's the number 2, the letter B, and the word present. My website is www.tobepresent.com. And on the website, there's tons of information and free resources, including guided meditations, videos. I have a YouTube channel that is To Be Present. And on there as well are guided meditations, videos explaining what mindfulness is. There's a very good video. I think we're about 50,000, 60,000 views. A lot of my friends and colleagues across the country use it in schools. I use it when I present to high schools. It's called Under Pressure, and it's about a 7-minute video with interviews from celebrities. And it's all about what mindfulness meditation is, a little bit about the neuroscience and how it's not this weird thing for kids. It's actually an amazing skill that can really help them not only cope with stresses in life, but also really thrive in their lives. Yeah, so I usually post events and workshops that I do. I work a lot locally. I teach classes in Westchester and New York City, and work in the schools here. And I'm also on several meditation apps. So I'm on Simple Habit, which is a pretty amazing kind of booming new meditation app with a lot of guided meditations. In particular, there's a really nice meditation series specifically geared towards teenage girls. I think it's a 7-day series that I made, 5 to 7 minute meditations on all kinds of things that teenage girls deal with, and help them develop a sort of meditation practice to help them do that. And I'm also on a new company called Journey Live, which is live streaming meditations every single day. I'm usually on at 9 p.m. Unless we're doing this next week. But it's a really nice resource. And I have a lot of actually families that go on it with their kids. They're only 15 minutes. There's actual interaction with live teachers, and it teaches you how to meditate. There's an amazing set of teachers. The meditations are all day long from 7 a.m. through 11 p.m. Live streaming meditation. So it's a great resource for people that would like to learn to quiet their brains, to de-stress, and to learn tools that mindfulness can help you develop. So those are lots of different ways to find me. And
before we get to Theo, we've been talking about it for a while, but we hope, we just Better Listen publishes about 500 audio titles. So we hope to start distributing some of Cheryl's wonderful audios in the near future. Okay, and Theo.
Sure. So the easiest way to kind of find more information about me and about my work is to go to my website, which is www.topcoaching.com. So that's TEOP coaching.com. I'm also on Twitter. I tend to post a lot about digital wellness, the latest research in that area, kind of habit shifting practices that we can engage in, a lot of the latest research from some of these fields that are relevant to this topic. And so my handle there is PSY Coach TP. So PSY Coach TP. That's really the kind of the best way to stay in touch and keep up with a lot of my work. I tend to post that up there. And then the easiest way to actually get in touch is just to go on my website and to send me a message, and I'll try and reply as soon as possible. I try to use my social media as mindfully as possible as well. I'm not on Instagram yet. That's the only one that I refuse to get on so far, even though it would be very good for me, apparently. Work-wise, so everybody says, but that one I'm refusing to get on so far, which is kind of from, again, back to the topic we're talking about, from a lot of the observations I've made about how Instagram is designed to be used. It's incredibly difficult to put down, and so I've kind of made that conscious choice to not engage with that yet anyway. But you'll find a lot of resources on my website. I have a list of books that I recommend in all these different kind of fields that I work through, and I try to update that as frequently as possible with new and interesting releases. And then again, you can find information about my work on my website if you're interested to work with me individually, to invite me to speak at your school or workplace, invite me to do a workshop, whatever it is. The website's kind of a kind of one-stop shop.
All right, beautiful. So in a second, we'll give you guys a chance to ask questions. I have questions for all of you, and you might have questions for each other. But just so you know, everyone on Livecast, we are on Facebook Live, and it's facebook.com/wisdomfeed. And everyone watching us on Facebook, we're doing a live cast with this pretty cool organization that we were introduced to. This is our first live cast, and it's a really, really nifty app. It's called Castbox, and you could listen to virtually pretty much any podcast on it, but we're live there. So you can kind of check each other of the streaming options. But Joshua H. on Livecast asked a question: what about case studies or peer-reviewed studies? So I guess that speaks to the science. Either of you have a study that comes to mind, or along with one of the questions I was going to ask, I think that everyone knows intuitively that if you're more relaxed, you're going to do better at work, you're going to do better as a parent, you're going to do better as a human being. But now I love that the science backs it up. So that's why there's mindfulness in every new company now. There's like meditation rooms, and if it's very Star Trek actually, like where you used to, for you younger people, Star Trek. Well, I guess there's movies now, but they had like a holodeck where you would go into a room and just turn it on, and you were at you were at a stream, or you were at a boxing match, and so now all these corporations, they have meditation rooms. It's kind of weird, but it's because the science backs it up, and there's more productivity. People are healthier. They miss work less, and so there's it helps the bottom line. So any case studies or peer-reviewed studies come to mind that are relevant to this conversation?
Cheryl, do you want to say anything? I was just going to say, in terms of not mindfulness in particular, because again, Cheryl can speak about that, but just in terms of the impact of technology on us, on our children. There are lots of studies that have been done over the past, say, maybe 5 years, kind of three to 5 years, since this has started being researched a little bit more intensely, dating back all the way to probably around 2011 or 2012. So far, really, the most of what we've come up with is that there's a correlation between things like, extensive or excessive tech use and symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, sometimes even suicidal thinking and things like that. And you do kind of see now that there are kind of two different camps when it comes to the researchers at some of the top universities in the world, where you do have that one camp that is very not necessarily anti-tech, but is very concerned about the impact that technology has on kids. So Jean Twenge, for example, is one person who's also written a book called iGen about this impact that technology has on kids, and the fact that it seems to be causing an increase in isolation, loneliness, and then things like depression, suicidal thinking as well, and so on. There is this other camp, though, that has looked at some of the same data, run some slightly different statistical analyses on it, and said, look, we didn't find any of these associations that you found. So that's, I think, one of the additional things that's making it very confusing for parents when we're asked for things like, show me the research that technology is ruining my child's brain. We could absolutely show case studies that seem to indicate that, but then the other camp can always come and say, but look at these studies, they seem to show that technology doesn't have any bigger of an impact than, I don't know, whether they eat broccoli or something like that. That's a stupid example. It's not literally that, but it's very hard to say. For me, but personally, as somebody who practices in this field, I kind of resort to trusting the individual. If an individual comes to me and says, I feel like I'm hooked on this, I feel like I'm struggling with this, or my child acts like an addict when I take the phone away, I don't really need a lot of research. That to me is enough to say that, okay, we need to do something about this, and we need to try and help and change some of the habits and raise a little bit of awareness and psychoeducate and so on. So there is a lot of research out there. Unfortunately, we're not yet at a place where we could really conclusively say tech has this impact, and if you do this, then you're going to feel better. There is one psychiatrist called Victoria Dunkley, who's based in California, who has written, I think, definitely one book, maybe more, about doing digital detoxes with kids. So that's something that I would recommend people have a look at. And I think I recently saw her on a conference or webinar as well. So she talks a lot about these negative impacts of technology, as she talks about it from a very neuroscientific perspective. And she has a lot of experience with working with kids who are sometimes kind of properly addicted. Again, using the term addicted is a very controversial thing in this field as well, but she has done a lot of research on this, and she has case examples from her own practice where she has seen kids come in who use excessive amounts of tech, and then she'll guide the family through, I think she either does a 20 or a 30-day detox of a sort, and then helps them reintroduce some of those elements. So it's a little bit like when you have food intolerance, and then you do that diet where you kind of remove some of the components, then you gradually reintroduce
Yeah,
them.
but don't
So,
take my phone away. Come on, you can't.
I know.
Sorry.
I must say that I agree with Teo very much here. With tech dependence is a better term now than saying tech addiction. But digital detox is a big thing. It's making its way over here from overseas. Parents are embracing it. Studies will show you that if you do remove the child from some semblance of time on the device, they will return to things that they have done in the past that are enjoyable. They reconnect. It's taking that disconnect to reconnect. So I know there's a lot of studies that you just pointed out as well, and you can look at it with that perspective, but you also have to look at the child's behavior. Parents need to pay attention to what is going on with their child, not necessarily look at everybody else's child, because everybody's very different. Children are very different. Parenting skills, morals, values are very different. And recognize that if some behavior is changing, some attitude is shifting, there may be a problem, and to address that. So while we want to look at the scientific data that we're trying to capture right now, and you're going to have different perspectives, just like we do with our wonderful politics that are going on right now in this country, I think it's very important to really pay attention to your child and see the signs that are going on. So things like digital detox, a child might be resistant at first. They will say that. They go into a state of panic. You're going to take my phone? But you will see them in 24 hours, 12 hours, 72 hours, return to things that they did and liked before, and re-engaging and communicating. These kids are losing language skills. They're losing how to have face-to-face conversations because we're all doing this. So there's an impact. And there's always going to be that debate. Is it scientific? Is it not? Is it have scientific backup for it or not? And what parents need to do is really, they can read all that stuff, but I really feel they need to make independent decisions based on their own children and their skills, morals, values right in front of them. Continue to read and educate, but pay attention to your kids. They're going to give you the signs right then and there. So I agree.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there's a ton of research coming out probably daily on mindfulness and the effect it has on our health and wellness and how it affects our brains. I have a whole page on my website that cites and links you to the research studies. It's been studied much longer in adults than it has been in children, so the research in children is much newer. But a lot of interesting research on the effects of mindfulness practice. And essentially, I think what it boils down to is it is essentially an exercise for the brain in focus, concentration, and self-awareness, so that the more we practice it, just like going to the gym, we can actually develop these different skills, brain skills, just like we would if we're doing bicep curls. So it's a very healthy way to exercise our brain. And in terms of research, there's some interesting research that I link to in my website about how they've done functional MRIs on people who do even as little as 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation practice, and how sort of structures in the brain change, which is amazing. The amygdala, which is the fight or flight response, is actually less reactive in meditators, and the places in the brain related to emotional regulation, for example, or even some executive functioning, is actually thicker. So all of this science, I will say with a warning, is brand new. We don't really know how our brains operate, but the research does seem to be pretty interesting on how it is actually doing something for us. I will agree with both Melissa and Theo that for me as a practitioner, I almost don't need to depend upon the research. I know for myself, it has made a huge difference. I know for my own children, it has made a huge difference to be able to learn these skills. And just by anecdote, which again to me means more than some of the more confusing academic research, I run a lot of classes with teens, and one of the questions I ask them is, we do a little meditation at the beginning of our workshops, and I say, go to your favorite place, go to the place where you're most peaceful, and we do a guided visualization. And it is fascinating to me how almost always those places are places where they are in nature and there is no technology. If a child goes to camp in the summer and their phones are banned, all those kids will say, my favorite place in the whole world is camp, because I'm outside and with my friends, and they don't verbalize it. There's no technology, but there is no technology. So like Melissa was saying, the kids are losing that connection to a non-digital world and to being in a truly connected face-to-face relationship with other humans, and to be in things like nature. So although the science is great, there's so many anecdotal evidence that it is just incredibly healthy to take those phones away, to shut them off, and kids find a different way to truly be happy without it. And I think that that's incredibly important for them to experience.
You know, I see a comment that Papa Bear on Castbox, he posted that I find it resonates with me for sure. You know, parents use the electronics as babysitters instead of dealing with their children. You know,
Yeah.
Guilty.
Yeah.
There's how many times have we all walked into a restaurant recently? You walk in, you're waiting for your table, you sit down, you look over to your left or to your right, you see a family of 5. All 5 heads are down.
Yep.
They're on their devices. And this is what modeling behavior is so important too, is to put those, everybody needs to come down from the day. You need to put those devices away, reconnect. We're losing that sense of connection with our children, with our spouses, with what's going on. We are multitasking too much. So yeah, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. And parents, first thing we'll do is we'll give them a device. We have to finish our report. So we're going to give them a device and we're going to start typing away. And we're losing that. We're overdoing everything, our society right now. And we're losing that mindfulness and that connectiveness to our surroundings, to our people, to what's going on. That's why I said the eye contact. We're losing. Students that are coming out of high school are having a hard time either having a job interview or a college interview, because of the language. They're using text lingo so much, they're texting. They're having that issue with communication, and they don't know how to look somebody in the eye. They're losing it. And that's something that's so frustrating. And you want to re-engage them with that. So it's hard.
Yeah, one of the authors we work with is Douglas Rushkoff, and he's a professor in Queens College. And he said something recently that, and he's been a professor for years and years, but in the last 4 or 5 years, he gets more medical notes from college age kids that they cannot stand up in front of people and have such fear of being face to face with people that they're getting medical notes that they don't have to do the presentation. Now that is just another symptom of how it's kind of insidious. It's affecting everything. And Papa Bear said, you know, everyone at the dinner table, they're all on their phones. And they're texting each other.
I was going to say, I'm looking at some of these comments. And so I want to say what Papa Bear says in terms of the rule of no electronics at the dinner table. I think everyone who works in this space recommends no tech at the dinner table, no tech in the bedroom, for the sake of your kind of ability to sleep, to fall asleep, but also because some of the research shows that couples who bring their devices into their bedroom generally have less sex than the couples who don't bring the tech in. So if for no other reason, don't bring your tech in so that you can have more sex with your partner. But then Jimmy made the comment as a kind of alternative, which I think is also really important to keep in mind, making the tech a component of the connection between the parent and the child. So the example there is his son doing a podcast with him. So there are definitely ways that we can use technology in wonderful ways with our kids. Kids who maybe enjoy taking photographs can, when they're old enough, open up an Instagram account in which they'll showcase their photography, or creating videos with your kids, or doing podcasts. So they're definitely, or you know, Skyping with the grandparents who are not in the same city or state or country as you. There are lots of really wonderful ways to to engage in the technology together. And again, I always hear, again, colleagues who are in the same space always recommend that, the co-viewing, the co-using, participating, even if it's really irritating things like Fortnite or any of those kinds of games, to at least spend a little bit of time to sit down with your kid and go, okay, what is the big deal? Explain this to me. I want to know. Bring me into this so that I can actually, you know, see it with your eyes, understand what the big deal is. And kids feel, especially teenagers, right? As soon as you make them feel like something that they're doing is interesting and important, they just kind of, you know, puff up and they become so much more kind of confident and just kind of self-satisfied knowing that you want to partake in something that they're doing. So that is another kind of option. On the one hand, yes, we do want to kind of ban electronics from some parts of our lives because we need to take control. But on the other hand, especially when it comes to our kids, there are ways of incorporating tech in really lovely ways, so that we can bond, you know, so that we can bond with them in wonderful ways. And again, speaking of Douglas Rushkoff, I had the huge privilege of presenting at a conference that he was presenting at. As well, and he often talks about, he has this concept of team human, and of how important it is to connect with each other and to kind of to bond together. And so that's something that that he talks about a lot when it comes to using tech in these ways so that we can bond, so that we can really use tech in humane ways. We spoke at a conference that was focused on humane technology, and all of us speakers were asked about what to us does this concept of humane technology mean. So for me personally, one of the elements is bonding, technology that actually helps us bond in meaningful ways. But the other thing is technology that knows how to make itself scarce, that knows how to get out of our way so that, you know, it can do its little role, but then it gives us the option of just putting it away and switching it off. And of course, we know that technology is not designed to do that. It's designed to do exactly the opposite. And so when I work with parents, for me, that kind of the first component of creating a solution for them is, and something I really insist on, is that parents have to educate themselves about persuasive design, the attention economy, because that's where a lot of the self-compassion, I think, comes from. It's very difficult to avoid things as a human being, to resist temptations. It takes so much energy, so much mental energy, and we're constantly trying to do that. We're constantly trying to resist the tech. So it's really important to understand that that's why it's really hard for all of us, especially our children, to disengage and to create some rules around tech.
And something that comes to mind, so my younger boy plays Fortnite, and Fortnite, you know, we never had guns in our house. We were always kind of like crunchy granola and all this, but Fortnite, I guess, is not the worst in terms of blood and gore. But what's amazing about it, when I was a kid, I used to go to the park to hang out with my friends. I didn't need to text every time I crossed the street that I'm okay, or that I didn't get mugged, or whatever. And I used to go in the morning and come back at night with a few little change in my pocket, happy as a clam, safe as could be. And now, well, what Melissa, we go into in the course, is that it's really kind of scary out there for kids. But on the positive side, so he'll go down and play Fortnite, and he'll play with his friend from camp who lives in Canada, his friend who moved to Israel, his friend who lives around the corner, and that's his new park. That's who he plays with. Yeah. And, you know, I can't really argue with that. I rather he was at a park, but that's how they emotionally bond. And then the other thing, humane tech, I've gone to the Wisdom 2.0 conferences on and off since they started, really. And a few years ago, I met Tristan Harris, and he started this whole humane tech movement, so to speak. And he talks about that every one of these tech companies have neuroscientists getting paid top dollar. So when I call my kid to come in and have dinner, It's not just a kid. It's not just his friend in Israel. It's not just his friend, around the corner. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of neuroscientists that I'm fighting to get him off the bleeping thing.
Yeah.
And, it's black and white, and it's a new digital frontier. And how do you navigate it? How do you model it? Get off the phone, but I can't put the damn phone down myself.
I was going to follow up with that too, to circle back to the role modeling question that both Melissa and Theo had mentioned, because, a lot of people say to me, how do I teach my kids how to be mindful? And my answer is be mindful yourself, practice yourself. They see exactly what we do. And if we are stressed out and always on our phones, guess what? They're going to be always on their phones, and they're going to learn those same sort of stress responses and way of being that we do. So I think it's so important. And also, and I'm sure you all acknowledge this too, parents will want to institute rules about technology. And then they say, oh, but I have to take this work phone call. And, oh, I have to answer these emails. And no, the answer is you have to practice what you preach, and you have to be self-aware enough to know that, we're sort of tied to our phones as well. And I think it's, again, part of the process of understanding and being really self-aware that when you, even as a parent, say, I'm going to answer this work email, you're telling your child that they are less important than whatever's on that phone. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just incredibly important for us as adults and parents and role models to really be self-aware of our own usage and what messages it sends and our own dependence upon it. And, really we have to be sort of better digital users and models to our kids. It's not like we can just make rules for them, but we don't count because we have to have the phone by our beds because X, Y, and Z. I see that all the time. So, I just challenge all the parents out there to really sort of practice what you preach, and you'll see the benefits of it yourself.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed.
Yeah.
No question. It's impossible to do, but
not impossible.
Not impossible.
Yeah.
Difficult.
One of the questions that Jimmy has asked is, as an adult, how do you separate work from home? And that's one thing I think probably all three of us do trainings in kind of corporate settings as well, at workplaces. And some of the times, and I was just doing one this morning on mental health awareness, what I often find is that even though, and Steve, you were saying this earlier as well, even though there is kind of officially, visibly an effort made by the company to introduce things like nap rooms and mindfulness rooms and coffee shops and all these things that have made Google and Facebook and places like that very well known. What I often experience when people come in to the room for my training, many of them, not all of them, but many of them will have their laptops on them. And as soon as they sit down, they'll open up the laptop and they'll do whatever it is that they're doing. And so I was doing one training a couple of weeks ago. It is a tech company, a pretty successful one. And it was a room of about 30 people. One by one, every single person had a laptop on them. And so I asked the person who's standing next to me, who's the wellness coordinator, are they all going to have their laptops while we're talking about, and we were talking about resilience. And it was actually interesting because it was on September 11th, and we were talking about resilience, and we were in the World Trade Center area as well. So I felt like the whole experience was very meaningful. And then one by one, these kind of almost zombies started entering the room, and I thought, this is such a significant moment. I want them to tune in to what we're saying. I want them to take something away from this. And so what I always do is at the beginning, I'll just make a joke about it, and I'll make them feel very uncomfortable and self-conscious about it. And the good thing was that maybe 2 people only out of a room full of people, about 35 people, only a couple of them checked their tech. But most of them were very good at kind of resisting it. But I think that's one of the issues that I think workplaces and corporates are going to have to tackle from their end. It's fine on the one hand to provide those really beautiful spaces filled with plants and organic coffee and all these things, but if on the other hand there's messaging there suggesting that you have to constantly be reachable, you have to constantly be available. If an emergency happens, I need to be able to get in touch with you. I need you to be accessible on weekends. I need you on Sunday to start preparing for Monday, which we're now hearing people say more and more, that those Monday blues actually start a day early now. If that messaging is still subtly being conveyed to people, you can have as many mindfulness and meditation rooms as you want. People are not going to be able to disconnect, even in those situations when they have, for example, a trainer come in just for that 1 hour to talk to them about a particular topic. So I always try to, when I'm at these trainings, encourage people as much as I can without getting into trouble with senior management to kind of try and really insist on having those spaces where there is no phone. We put it down, put it away. You don't have to switch it off, but just if you already have the kind of the luck or the privilege or the opportunity to work at such a beautiful workspace, really use that, and really try and distance yourself a little bit from your tech. So I think that's one role that corporates and workplaces are going to be playing in this. They're really going to have to try and enable their employees to take those moments where they can really disconnect from work. Otherwise, the three of us can say whatever we want. If a parent works for a company like that, they're picking up those habits 10 hours a day or however many days they work. And then it's going to be very hard for them to come home and truly be disconnected and be connected with their kids. So I think that's another really big problem in this whole story.
I think we need to go old school. Remember the old phones where they were attached to the wall?
Yes, with the little loopy thing.
Hide from your parents when you were on the phone.
Yes.
Like we're always on culture. This constant, we call it textual harassment. You can be text, you can be reached out to. Just to your point, you're talking about even somebody reaching out to you to be prepared for Monday. You're working all day Sunday.
Yeah.
Technology is a gift, but it's also an issue, and we have to learn, and like you said, to train corporations, jobs, whoever, even schools, give them a break. Get off of technology a little bit. It's so important to do that. We're just, this always on culture is just really developing and expanding, and it's causing some issues. Absolutely. I agree.
I think in the meantime, until that happens too, like one of the little bits of advice I give parents, in terms of when you get home from work, is to set aside time. Like, this is my time to listen to my child's day. Instead of, our brains are not wired like this anymore because we're constantly multitasking. So we all know that we can be listening to our child and thinking about our to-do list or our meeting tomorrow. So part of mindfulness in my work is literally saying to ourselves in our own head, I am going to be here now with my child, and I want to hear everything about your day. And then later I'll answer when they're asleep. Then I'll take 20 minutes and answer my emails. But we tend to want to do everything all at the same time. And then we end up listening to a story, but not really listening to the story.
Not hearing it.
So exactly.
Yeah,
so,
one
of the little tips I often say to parents in my classes and workshops is I'll say to them, if you're doing something and you have to answer an email, you can say to your child, I'm going to answer this email, and then I'm all yours.
Yeah.
And then put your phone down and be with your child. So you're sort of setting your own parameters of saying, I have work and it's important, and this is my time for this, but now I'm all yours. And that's okay. It's okay, but you have to actually do it.
Yeah. And it gives them a much better understanding, I think, also of what tech is for, because that's the problem. We have our whole lives are in our pockets. Every possible thing we could need is on that phone, which is why we get distracted so easily. So that's one of the things that I also always recommend to parents. If you really have to use it while your child is there, don't simply ignore them. Actually tell them, I'm doing this right now. I'm texting daddy to ask about dinner, or I have to message my boss right now because I need to ask them so and so. And then at least you're using the tech, but you are in a way connecting with your child, and you're actually teaching them. This is what we use technology for. And there's been some research done on this at Hunter College. Dr. Tracy Dennis Tawari, who's a friend of mine and also a colleague in this space, has done research. She mostly researches anxiety in kids and teenagers, but she has done these studies where she'll have parents come into the lab with a toddler, a small child, and she'll have them, it's the still face experiment, but she will do it with mobile phones, where she'll have the parents intentionally ignore their kids for a certain period of time, and they observe how the child reacts and what their behavior is. And Diane Sawyer interviewed her for one of her specials. Yes, and so you may have seen it. And it's very, I don't have kids of my own, but I work with children. Like I said, I love children. I found it incredibly painful to watch that.
Very
Because
painful, yeah.
Yeah, especially there was this one little boy who kept going, "Mommy, mommy, but we have to go now, mommy. We have to go now, mommy." And he kept, poor thing, he kept trying and trying to connect with her and to engage with her. And of course, she was instructed to not do that. So she was looking at her phone. He kept going towards the door, thinking, "Okay, look, come, mommy, let's do this, let's do this." And he just, poor thing, he just wouldn't give up. So, so that's another scary thing with us being this engaged with tech. And I'm sure we all see it all the time. Kids who are literally begging and pleading for their parents' attention, but they're not getting it. And the number of, mommy, daddy, that don't get answered because parents are off doing other things. So like Cheryl said, the easiest way to switch that up a little bit is just to actually verbalize what it is you're doing and say, I'll be with you in a second, but let me just do this first, because it really it hurts kids. When you ignore them, it physically hurts them because they feel rejected and they feel isolated as a result of it. So it's another kind of little, well, I don't know how little it is, but it's a tweak that parents can definitely become a little bit more kind of aware of.
Wow, cool. We got a little bit of a late start, but I think we're hitting on some pretty interesting topics. So, so I wonder, maybe we should go around and just a few minutes of your top takeaways or top things you find helpful at work, and any kind of closing thoughts, because we can go for a while, but it's kind of getting late, I think. But we did it though. The tech, I don't want to jinx it, but so far it's working. So all right, boy, and I want to thank the three of you for putting up with the tech headaches and trying to figure it all out. And so far, it's working. So.
Steve, do you want to take questions before we do that, or is there?
Yeah, let's see.
I think getting into takeaways, if we're going to continue this, we may not want to, give away so many takeaways right now and really try to keep the conversation going, because I can tell you, even with these two young ladies here tonight, I've already learned a great deal from them, having conversations with them. So I don't know if we want to just answer some questions right now and then lead into next week.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you have questions for each other?
Do I have questions?
Probably yes. Well, I'm always, as someone who doesn't have kids of my own, but who works with kids on this, I'm always interested to talk to parents who also do this work and have kids of their own, no matter what the age of the kids. So my question to both of you would be, how do you find these things to exist and emerge with your own kids, and how do you, Cheryl, use mindfulness with your kids when it comes to kind of them and you navigating tech? And then Melissa, how do you use your own work with your kids to manage the same things? But that's just my selfish kind of curiosity, something that I'd want to know.
Cheryl, you get to go first.
Sure. So I've been, I guess, fortunate to have been practicing mindfulness with my kids for over 10 years. So they started when they were pretty little. And, having teenagers, I'm well aware of the eye rolls when we say, let's breathe deeply or whatever I continue to do with them, which is where the role modeling, quite frankly, comes in really handy, because if I'm doing it and they see that it's helping me, especially during teenage years, that goes a long way. So I think with my own kids, what I have seen, I mean, one in a negative is I've seen the tech dependence grow. My son is 19 and is much less tech dependent than my 14-year-old daughter. I think there's a difference between boys and girls as well, but it is amazing, even between my own children, the development of the dependence upon technology and social media. It's amazing. My older son doesn't use Facebook. He doesn't have an Instagram. I mean, it's a whole, it's like an unbelievable growth in the usage, even between my own children, my oldest and youngest. It's just been a real education. And I have to say, for many ways, mindfulness has been one of the greatest tools in my parenting, even in my own frustration level of how to deal with dealing with the frustrations of distracted kids, and to be able to approach it calmly, and to be able to really discuss what the issues are, and to, like you said, Theo, validate what their experience is, to hear them, to understand how challenging it is for them to grow up in this world, and the incredibly difficult social, channels that they have to navigate, is just, I think for me to be compassionate to that and to really understand that is huge as a parent. And I think maybe it was Melissa who mentioned, or maybe it was Theo, about keeping the lines of communication open is also huge. Not to get angry and punish them as much as to understand what they're experiencing, and to really try to be a part of the conversation, not just the sort of enforcer, because I actually don't think we really understand what they experience. It's not the world we grew up in. So it's just been invaluable. And I'll just end with a brief story of my own son. He went to college, and it's hard for these kids. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get from parents whose kids go away to college, and then they call me because their kids are falling apart. They just don't have the social skills. They don't have the coping skills to deal with being on their own, and to deal with the stress and anxiety that they experience in college. And so, from my personal experience, I had taught my son breathing, mindful breathing, the value of being in nature, disconnecting from devices, got a lot of eye rolls, in his teenage years. And when he went to college last year, and he called me one day and said, Mom, I'm feeling really, really stressed out and overwhelmed. I went outside and I looked at the trees and I took a deep breath, and he said, I think this mindfulness stuff really, really works. I feel much better. And I sort of did a little jig and a dance in my kitchen, and I said, gosh, they listen, they hear us. Yeah. And so, for the parents out there, like I am, it's a challenge. And so we have to sort of be compassionate to ourselves. It's a struggle, and really understand that these kids are really facing incredible challenges in growing up in this digital age. So, that keep at it. And my son's story for me is just another anecdote of how it really works. It's very helpful. To do these practices, and to be sort of very self-aware and open to what they're experiencing.
I see an interesting question. That fascinating. I think it's amazing, from your 19-year-old, from your oldest to your youngest. It's a different age, like the ice age and the tech age, and it's only like a few years apart. So Spiritually Tarot, the username on Livecast. I work from home, so I have to find ways to make time for his kid, or the person's kid. I guess they have a son, and to play with their kids to leave their work. So how do they find the balance? I have to make work a game for me, because if not, I'd never get anything done, and I'd just be playing ABC with him on the floor. I guess it's a younger kid. So how do you get things done and not just hand them a device, because and he's working from home? So that's a good question.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
Well, Melissa, do you want to answer the other one first? Because I'm still very curious.
Cheryl touched a lot on it. I think, recognizing the difference between even my 10-year-old to my 14-year-old. I delayed giving my 10-year-old access after watching what happened with my 14-year-old. So I think that is definitely something that, that I noticed. And in addition to that, just understanding that you have to have this communication, because there's such a fear. Parents just don't understand everything and recognizing what they're going through. And it is different. Steve had mentioned before, the olden days when we grew up, you'd go outside, you play in the park, you'd use your imagination, you go out, ride your bicycle down the street. Things are different, but I think there has to be a balance between social media use, tech dependence, and taking a break. So, I mean, for me personally, it's communication, it's understanding. And you know what? Kids want to have a voice, right? As parents, we don't have to necessarily agree with them. We just need to hear them. So if they're trying to explain, and of course, peer pressure is something I tell the parents, don't fall for peer pressure. Everybody has a phone at 9 years old. Everybody has Snapchat. You can't fall to that. But kids want to have a voice. So if you at least hear them and you hear, okay, I want to use Snapchat. I want to use Twitch. I want to use this. I want to use Kick, whatever it is. And you give them the opportunity to explain themselves. You already may have the answer in the back of your head, but at least they get to be heard. There's so many times parents will go, no, or you had made comments before too. You get a lot of parents that will say to you, well, how old should they be before I give them a device? How old should they be before they get onto this site or that app or this and that? And one of the biggest things I say to parents is, I can't answer that for you. You can read the recommendations. You can go to those sites and look it up, but you know your child. You know the maturity level. You know your existing moral skills and values you already have in place. You need to make that decision with your child and based on what your expectations are with the child. So it's like, for me, it's all about communication. And Cheryl said this too. You can't have a child, which I always talk about as it relates to accidentally being exposed to something, or perhaps a parent walks in and sees something on a website, or something happens with their phone. Give them the benefit of the doubt, right? First thing I say is sometimes these kids get on some of these sites by accident. If a parent turns around and goes, that's it, you're off the internet, I'm taking your phone for the next 6 months, that's it, I'm going, that's it. They will not have that communication open. The child will not come to them again. We don't want to shut that communication down. So that's one of my big things with my kids is tell me what you want to use it for. They have a voice. I may have an answer in my head. Of course, they always say to me, I can't go on anything because you're doing these seminars, which is not the case. But it's also, you want to give them some independence, but accountability. As I say to parents is, you're still a parent. You want to give them a little bit, but you're still there to protect them. Don't just give them the keys to the kingdom. So everything is a balancing act. And for me, it's really about communication and keeping that lines of communication open with your child.
Right. And we've been working on this course and we're kind of launching it tonight or over the next couple of weeks. But I learned so much just by building out the course with Melissa. It's really pretty comprehensive way to approach how to manage cyber tech, and also from a safety level. There's so many different metaphors, but they have a device and there could be anyone from any corner of the world or around the corner, and there's no way to know if they're peeking, and you can really get creeped out. Are they looking in the window right now? I mean, or are they around the corner, or are they 50-year-old in Germany or a 20-year-old in Asia, or around the corner. So I think part of what I think Melissa does in the course is it doesn't change any of that, but it helps you bring awareness to the reality. And there's a lot of tips and tools. And to be honest, I could, would love to have tools to offer from all the presenters here, because you could each go, you're each experts and bring a lot to the table. What else? Any other questions? What's out there? Oh, I think Joshua mentioned that his kids in kindergarten have email. That's crazy.
Yeah, I saw some of those comments coming through. I was wondering what in the world is going on here. That's something.
Yeah, some of the big questions when I do my presentations in schools is the kids are very interactive. They're raising their hands. One of the questions that I ask them is, do you have an email outside of school? And I would say, traveling this country, I would say a good 50% of the kids, even below 3rd grade, have an email outside of school. And then I'll say, raise your hand or keep your hand up if your parents don't even know you have the email or they don't know the password.
Right.
60% of the hands go up. Kids will be kids. Remember, they're going to do all the things that we did. We don't have to name them on here. We tried to get away with when we were kids. The issue becomes that they will pay for it differently, right? So parents need to be aware of what their kids are signing up. One of the most common features that you have to have, whether it be an app, a site, a website, this, whatever, that when you sign up is an email. So the kids will create an email, right? So that's just a common thing that the kids will have.
And introducing them also, introducing them to tech without them having built the capacity for things like self-control, self-awareness, self-regulation, is a really scary thing. And a lot of my colleagues or our colleagues who are in this space who are particularly interested in early childhood development and early childhood education are very concerned about that in particular. Again, we know that the frontal part of the brain that is kind of the boss of us, the executive center, it doesn't really finish developing until we're about 25. Some scientists say even 28 years old. And so to give a kindergartner or whatever, a 5, 6, 7-year-old, a device like that of any kind, doesn't matter what it is, but a device that demands huge amounts of self-control and again, resisting temptation, and to kind of, I don't know, figure that, oh, they'll just figure it out on their own. That's just not realistic. It's simply not possible. They cannot do it. No more than they can control their, chocolate intake or whatever else it is, those famous marshmallow experiments, where kids were trying to resist that temptation. And oftentimes, because kids, for the most part, especially when they're younger, they will respect authority. They will listen to authority. In that marshmallow experiment, it was really cute to see the ways in which kids were trying to follow the rules and the ways in which they came up with trying to resist the marshmallow. So some of them started talking to themselves. Some of them would just kind of look away and try not to look at it. Kids will try to resist, but they can't really succeed. And for us to expect that they can is just simply unrealistic. They don't have the brains for that yet. And so introducing them at such a young age is just it's kind of irresponsible, and it's just unrealistic. They can't do it, which is why the later the better. And when it is introduced, of course, to do it in a way where you co-use it with them as much as possible. And again, you model to them and all these other things that we were talking about. But email for a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old, I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
I know. I'm
All
not
sure. Right. On one hand, we can go on for a long time, but
definitely.
Thank you all for all this. So any takeaway, not necessarily tips or takeaways, or it's a little late, but if you lead us in a meditation now, I want to fall asleep. So
yes, we'll all be asleep.
So any last minute takeaways or thoughts, or?
I just want to say, I really honestly could not ask for a better panel than what we have tonight, because the perspectives are so realistic to what I talk about as it relates to educating parents on one end. Everything that we're talking about, we all touch upon, but our approaches are all trying for the end goal. So I truly am blessed to have been on this with these ladies. I think that their perspectives only enhance and make my message get even better. And I think it was a great night, and I welcome, you know, us getting together again in the future, because I really do feel, if you look at it in the broader perspective, the 3 different areas that we're talking about is all going for a certain end goal. So I welcomed tonight's discussion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think we could, without placing any limits on ourselves, we could probably talk for hours.
Hours and hours.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Although
But yeah,
Cheryl would put us to sleep by the end.
I know.
I'm happy to.
I know. Just ease us into it.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm very thankful for this, and thank you, Steve, for being the connector and putting us all together. And thank you for everyone who's watching us on Facebook, for people who are listening in through our live cast, the people who were listening in as we were doing our tech tests and who were being very helpful with their tips and tricks and things to make all of this work. And I'm really excited about the prospect of doing this again. So I can't wait for the next time. I'm already excited about it.
And I'll ditto all of that. It was a pleasure being with all of you. Amazing. Melissa and Theo, amazing. And Steve, thanks for your patience and your perseverance in the tech
I almost gave up a bunch of times.
Mission control, Steve. You're mission control.
Exactly. And I look forward to, future conversations. I think it's such an important topic, and we're just the beginning of this road. So I look forward to exploring it more with all of you.
Even, if we do this again, do it strategically now that we kind of know who each other is. Because just repeat, anyone listening, the 3 fine women that I'm talking with tonight are experts in their own niche in this related field. They've never met really before today or tonight. And somehow we got the gremlins out. Thank you, Papa Bear, out in live cast, who has helped, and anyone else who's helped. And I could imagine if we actually promote it, that we would have, real interaction.
Great.
Anything else before I sign off for us, or?
No.
Okay.
Good night and good luck.
Yes.
So thanks. Thanks everyone for listening and viewing, and thank my 3 wonderful panelists for putting it together. I just had a hunch that you would come together, that you complement each other's work in a good way, and I think that's exactly what happened. So I'm gratified that all the tech and sanity led to sanity, which leads us
to exactly what we've been talking about.
Perfect ending.
In the digital age. Okay, cyber sanity. I'll sleep to that. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Good night,
everyone
everyone.
listening. We'll see you next time.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.